14-year-old Nora had exactly 45 minutes to reach the adoption meeting that would finally give her a home. Then she saw the boy drowning in the river. His father's motorcycle lay twisted against the guardrail. Blood spread across the water's surface. Every second she stayed meant losing her only chance at a family. Every second she left meant watching a child die. She dove into that freezing water without hesitation, making a choice that would destroy her future. But what Nora didn't know was that the roar of motorcycles racing toward the riverbank wasn't bringing revenge. It was bringing the kind of family that only the Hells Angels can create. The first light of dawn crept through the alley behind Riverside City's downtown district, and 14-year-old Nora Castellano was already awake. She'd been awake for hours, actually. Clutching a worn piece of paper with an address scribbled in her own careful handwriting, Riverside Family Services, 428 Maple Street, 10 o'clock appointment. Her hands trembled as she read it for the 100th time that night, terrified that if she fell asleep, she might somehow miss it. This was her chance, her first real chance in 4 years. Nora carefully folded the paper and tucked it into the front pocket of her torn backpack, the same backpack that held everything she owned in this world, a change of clothes that didn't fit quite right, a toothbrush she'd found still packaged behind a drugstore, 3 library books on emergency medicine and CPR that she'd checked out under a fake name because the librarians had stopped asking questions years ago, and supplies, always supplies, bandages, medical tape, antiseptic wipes, a small pair of scissors, the tools of someone who'd taught herself to save lives because it was the only way she knew how to feel close to the father she'd lost. Nora had been 10 years old when her world stopped making sense. Her father, Captain Vincent Castellano, had been a firefighter, and she remembered the way he'd come home smelling like smoke and courage, how he'd sit with her at night, teaching her the basics of first aid and showing her how to stay calm in emergencies. When he ran into that burning apartment building to save a family trapped on the 4th floor and never came out, something inside Nora shattered. And when her mother, unable to cope with the grief, abandoned her at a gas station 3 months later and simply drove away, that shattered piece turned to dust. The foster system had felt like a prison. The first home had an older boy who came into her room at night. When she reported it, they called her a liar. The second home treated her like a servant, making her cook and clean for 6 other kids while their biological children did nothing. So at 11 years old, Nora ran. She ran with nothing but that backpack and a stubborn dream that refused to die, no matter how many cold nights she spent curled up behind dumpsters, or how many times her stomach cramped with hunger. She wanted to be a paramedic. She wanted to help people the way her father had helped people. And she taught herself everything she could from library computers and medical videos and textbooks she memorized page by page before the librarians kicked her out at closing time. Helping people made her feel close to him. It was the only thing that did. Now, 4 years later, Nora stood up in that alley and brushed the dirt off her jeans, trying to make herself look presentable. The adoption meeting was in 3 hours. 3 hours to get across town, clean herself up in a gas station bathroom, rehearse her answers one more time. She'd practiced every question they might ask. Why do you want to be adopted? Because I want to belong somewhere. What are your dreams for the future? I want to be a paramedic and help people who can't help themselves. What can you offer a family? I'll work hard. I'll be good. I promise I'll be good. Nora slung her backpack over her shoulders and started walking toward the bus stop, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She checked the time on the church clock tower 2 blocks away. 7:43 in the morning. Plenty of time. She'd be early. She'd smile. She'd shake their hands firmly like adults did. She'd show them she was worth taking a chance on. The morning air was cold, and Nora pulled her thin jacket tighter around her body as she walked past the familiar streets of Riverside City. She knew every corner of this place, every alley where she'd slept, every shop owner who'd chased her away. Every person who'd looked right through her, like she wasn't even there. But today was different. Today someone was going to see her. Today someone was going to choose her. She passed the fire station where her father had worked and paused at the memorial wall outside. His name was engraved there in polished stone. Captain Vincent Castellano, died in the line of duty. She pressed her fingers against the letters and whispered the words she whispered every time she passed this place. "I'm trying, Dad. I'm trying to make you proud." A voice behind her made her turn. It was Mrs. Ramona, the library security guard, who'd helped her more times than Nora could count. The old woman held out a granola bar and a small bottle of water. "For your big day," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You're going to do great, sweetheart." Nora took the food with gratitude she couldn't put into words and hugged the woman quickly before continuing on her way. She didn't see the sadness in Mrs. Ramona's face as she watched her go. She didn't know that the old woman was saying goodbye. If you've ever felt invisible and just wanted someone to see your worth, this story is for you. Hit subscribe, because Nora's about to teach us something about courage that changes everything. Comment heroes deserve families if you believe good people shouldn't be forgotten. Nora checked her reflection in a shop window, smoothing down her hair, trying to look adoptable. The church bells rang 9 o'clock. 1 hour to go. Plenty of time. She whispered her interview answers under her breath as she walked, her voice barely audible over the sound of her worn sneakers on the pavement. She didn't know it yet, but Nora's most important lesson was about to arrive in the worst possible way, and the choice she was about to make would seal both their fates forever. Nora was 3 blocks from the bus stop when she reached Riverside Bridge. It was a beautiful structure that spanned the rapids below, a river fed by mountain runoff that turned violent every spring. She walked across it carefully, her mind focused on the time, on getting to that adoption meeting, on not letting this chance slip through her fingers like everything else in her life had. The clock tower showed 9:20, 40 minutes until her future began. Then the world exploded. The roar of a motorcycle engine cut through the morning air, followed by the screech of tires and the sickening crunch of metal against metal. Nora spun around just in time to see a massive truck run a red light and clip a motorcycle carrying 2 riders. The bike spun violently, sparks flying as it scraped against the guardrail. The rider, a large man in a leather vest with patches she couldn't read from this distance, was thrown hard against the pavement. But the small figure on the back, a child, was thrown in a different direction, over the guardrail, into the rapids below. Time seemed to slow down as Nora watched the boy hit the water 25 feet below. The current grabbed him immediately, dragging him downstream like a rag doll. His father was screaming, trying to stand, but his leg was clearly broken, bent at an angle that made Nora's stomach turn. Other drivers were stopping, pulling out their phones, standing frozen in shock. But no one was moving. No one was running toward the river. No one was going to help. Nora looked at her watch. 9:23. She looked at the boy's hand disappearing beneath the surface of the water for the second time. She looked at the adoption letter in her pocket, the future she'd been fighting for, the family that was waiting to meet her in 37 minutes. Her father's voice filled her head, as clear as if he were standing right beside her. "Help who you can, when you can, Nora Bean. That's how we'd live forever." Nora dropped her backpack. The adoption letter spilled out onto the bridge, fluttering in the morning breeze. She tore off her jacket and ran toward the guardrail. The father was screaming for his son, his voice raw with terror. "Somebody help my son! Please, somebody help him!" Nora climbed onto the guardrail, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. She could see the boy now, 40 yards downstream, his head going under for the 3rd time. She didn't think. She didn't hesitate. She jumped. The fall seemed to last forever, the wind rushing past her face, the river rising up to meet her. When she hit the water, the cold drove the air from her lungs like a punch to the chest. The current grabbed her immediately, spinning her, disorienting her, dragging her under. She fought her way to the surface, gasping for air, scanning the rapids for any sign of the boy. There, 20 yards ahead, a small arm breaking the surface for just a second before disappearing again. Nora swam harder than she'd ever swum in her life, fighting the current that wanted to pull her under, her muscles screaming, her lungs burning. She reached the spot where she'd seen him last, and dove. The water was murky, filled with sediment and debris. She couldn't see more than a few feet in front of her. Her lungs were burning, demanding air, but she kept searching, her hands reaching out blindly. Then her fingers touched fabric. She grabbed hold and pulled, kicking toward the surface with everything she had left. They broke through together, and Nora gasped for air, holding the boy's head above water. He wasn't breathing, his lips were blue, his eyes were closed. Terror flooded through her, but her training kicked in, all those hours studying medical textbooks, all those nights memorizing CPR procedures. She spotted a rocky outcrop 30 yards downstream and swam for it, dragging the boy with her, fighting the current every inch of the way. When she finally pulled them both onto the rocks, her entire body was shaking, from cold, from exhaustion, from fear. But she didn't stop. She tilted the boy's head back, checked his airway, and started compressions. 30 compressions, 2 rescue breaths. 30 compressions, 2 rescue breaths. Come on, breathe. Don't you dare die on me. Please, please, not another one. I can't lose another one. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she worked, counting compressions, willing this child to live. Her watch lay shattered on the rocks beside her, the face cracked, the hands frozen at 9:58. 2 minutes until her adoption meeting, 2 minutes until her chance at a family disappeared forever. The boy suddenly coughed, water spewing from his mouth. His eyes fluttered open, confused and terrified. Nora collapsed beside him, her whole body shaking with relief and exhaustion and the devastating realization of what she'd just lost. Sirens were wailing in the distance, growing louder. People were shouting from the bridge above, and Nora held this stranger's child in her arms and whispered the same words over and over. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry. I tried. I'm sorry." The paramedics arrived within minutes, their sirens cutting through the morning air as they rushed to the rocky outcrop where Nora sat shivering beside the boy. They wrapped her in a thermal blanket and checked her vital signs while a second team worked on the child, assessing his condition with practiced efficiency. One of the paramedics, a woman with kind eyes and graying hair, looked at Nora with something like awe in her expression. "You saved his life," she said quietly. "The CPR you performed, the way you kept his airway clear, that was textbook perfect." "Where did you learn that?" Nora's teeth were chattering too hard to answer. She just shook her head and pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, watching as they loaded the boy onto a stretcher. He was conscious now, coughing and crying, calling for his father. A police officer approached Nora, his face serious but not unkind. "That was incredibly brave, what you did. We're going to need a statement from you. What's your name?" Nora looked past him toward the bridge where she could see the boy's father being treated by another paramedic team. The man's leg was in a temporary splint, but he was fighting to stand, his eyes scanning the riverbank desperately. "Where is she?" the man was shouting. "Where's the girl who saved my son?" Nora stood up, the blanket falling from her shoulders. She needed to leave, needed to get to the adoption center. Maybe if she explained what happened, maybe if she told them about the accident, they'd understand. They'd give her another chance. They had to. "What time is it?" she asked the officer. He checked his watch. 10:17. The words hit her like a physical blow. She was late, 17 minutes late, and she was soaking wet, covered in river mud, bleeding from a dozen cuts she hadn't even noticed until now. There was no way she could make it across town looking like this. No way she could walk into that meeting and convince anyone to give her a home. She'd ruined everything. The man from the bridge was calling out again, his voice carrying across the water. "I need to find her. I need to thank her. Please, someone find the girl who jumped." Nora backed away from the officer, panic rising in her chest. "I have to go," she said. "I'm sorry, I have to go." Before anyone could stop her, she turned and ran. She ran along the riverbank and up the embankment and into the maze of streets she knew so well, disappearing into the city like smoke. Behind her, she could hear the officer calling for her to wait. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Because if she stopped, if she let herself think about what she'd just lost, she would fall apart completely. On the bridge, Dashiell Cordova, road captain of the Hells Angels Riverside. Chapter watched the girl disappear into the distance, and something in his chest cracked wide open. His leg was broken. His motorcycle was destroyed. But his son, his 8-year-old Kieran, was alive. Alive because a teenage girl he'd never met had jumped off a bridge and risked her own life without a second thought. The paramedic was trying to get him to lie down, to let them transport him to the hospital, but Dash couldn't take his eyes off the spot where the girl had vanished. "Who was she?" he asked. "Did anyone get her name?" The police officer shook his head. She ran before I could get any information. Just took off. Dash pulled out his phone with shaking hands and made a call. The voice that answered was rough and commanding. "This is Reaper." Dash's voice broke as he spoke. "Brother, I need the club. I need everyone. My boy almost drowned, and some kid saved his life. A homeless girl from the looks of her. She jumped off the bridge and pulled Kieran out of the rapids, and she ran before anyone could thank her. I need to find her. I need to know who she is." There was a pause, then the sound of a motorcycle engine roaring to life. "We're on our way," Reaper said, "and brother, we will find her." Within the hour, the roar of motorcycles filled Riverside City as the Hells Angels mobilized. 12 bikes at first, then 15, then 20, as word spread through the chapter, and members dropped everything to answer Dash's call. They gathered at the bridge where the accident had happened, these men in leather vests covered with patches that spoke of brotherhood and loyalty and a code that outsiders rarely understood. Rourke Maddox, known to everyone as Reaper, stood at the center of the group. He was in his 50s, silver beard, eyes that had seen every kind of darkness the world could offer, and a presence that commanded respect without a single word. He listened as Dash described what had happened, how the girl had appeared out of nowhere, how she dove into rapids that would have killed most grown men, how she'd performed CPR that saved Kieran's brain from oxygen damage. And then she just ran, Dash finished, his voice thick with emotion, like she was afraid of something, like she didn't want to be found. Reaper looked at his road captain, at this brother who'd ridden beside him for 15 years, and made a decision that would change all their lives. "Then we find her," he said simply. "We find that girl, and we give her what she deserves." The Hells Angels fanned out across Riverside City, asking questions, following leads, and what they discovered about the girl who'd saved Kieran Cordova would break every single one of them. The first lead came from the bridge itself. A police officer remembered seeing a backpack left behind near the guardrail, abandoned in the chaos of the accident. One of the angels retrieved it from the lost and found at the police station, and when they opened it, they found the pieces of a life that shouldn't belong to any child. Worn clothes, a toothbrush, library books on emergency medicine, bandages and medical supplies, and a letter. Water-stained but still readable, with an official letterhead, Riverside Family Services. Appointment scheduled for 10 o'clock, Nora Castellano. Reaper read the letter aloud to the assembled club members, his voice growing quieter with every word. This girl had an adoption meeting this morning. She was on her way to finally get a family, and she stopped to save Kieran. She gave up everything. The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. These men knew sacrifice. They knew loyalty. But this was something different. This was a child choosing to lose her only chance at a home because she couldn't walk past someone in need. Reaper pulled out his phone and called Riverside Family Services. When the social worker answered, he could hear the exhaustion in her voice even through the phone line. "Ms." Portia Henning sounded frustrated when Reaper explained why he was calling. "Yes, Nora Castellano had an appointment this morning. No, she didn't show up. And no, Ms. Henning didn't have the resources to chase down every child who missed an appointment." This was Nora's third attempt at placement, she explained. After 3 no-shows, the file gets closed. That's policy. Reaper's grip tightened on his phone. "Ma'am, with all due respect, she didn't no-show. She was saving a drowning child. My road captain's son would be dead right now if she'd chosen to make your appointment instead." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "That's very unfortunate," Ms. Henning finally said, but her tone suggested she'd heard every excuse imaginable. "Nora has a pattern of self-sabotage. She's run from 2 foster placements. The family that was willing to meet her today was her last option. I'm sorry, but the system can't keep chasing children who refuse to commit." Reaper ended the call before he said something he'd regret. "The system," he muttered to his VP. "The system just gave up on a kid who jumped off a bridge to save a stranger." The Angels split up, canvassing the city, talking to anyone who might know the homeless girl who carried medical supplies and missed adoption meetings to help people. They found Mrs. Ramona at the public library, and when they showed her Nora's adoption letter, the elderly security guard broke down in tears. "That baby," she whispered. "That sweet baby had her big chance today. I gave her breakfast this morning. I wished her luck. She was so hopeful. Mrs. Ramona told them everything she knew. How Nora had been coming to the library for years, always reading medical textbooks, always studying like her life depended on it. How she'd been homeless since she was 10 years old, after her firefighter father died, saving people from a burning building, and her mother abandoned her at a gas station out of grief. How Nora had survived 4 years on the streets, teaching herself emergency medicine because it made her feel close to the father she'd lost. "She sleeps behind the laundromat on 4th Street, Mrs. Ramona said. "She's been trying so hard to get adopted so she can go to school, become a paramedic like her daddy wanted to be. And now she's lost her last chance because she stopped to save your friend's boy." The old woman looked at these dangerous-looking men with their leather and their motorcycles and saw something she hadn't expected. She saw them crying, every single one of them. The angels found Nora's camp behind the laundromat, just as Mrs. Ramona had described. It was heartbreaking in its simplicity. A tarp stretched between dumpsters to create shelter from the rain, a sleeping bag that had seen better years, and carefully organized in a waterproof container, Nora's treasures. A photo of a man in a firefighter's uniform, smiling beside a young girl with dark curls. Medical supplies organized with the precision of someone who took this seriously. And a journal, pages filled with neat handwriting, medical diagrams, and desperate hope. Reaper opened the journal to a random page and started reading aloud. Day 1, 1347 on the streets. Adoption meeting tomorrow. Maybe this time someone will want me. Maybe this time I'll finally have a home again. Maybe Dad is watching and he's proud of me for not giving up. I promise, Dad, if I get this chance, I'll help people just like you did. I'll make you proud. I swear I will. His voice broke on the last sentence. Around him, hardened men who'd faced violence and loss and every kind of darkness were openly weeping. This wasn't just some random kid. This was a warrior, a survivor, a hero who'd been invisible to everyone except the people she saved. If you believe doing the right thing should be rewarded, not punished, stay with me. Comment choose courage if Nora's sacrifice moves you, and subscribe if you want to see justice roll in on 2 wheels. Reaper closed the journal carefully and looked at his brothers. "We find her tonight," he said, "and when we do, we make this right, because that girl saved one of ours, and that makes her one of ours." The Hells Angels had a code that outsiders rarely understood. They took care of their own. They protected their family. And whether Nora Castellano knew it yet or not, she'd just become family. The sun was setting over Riverside City when they finally found her. She was sitting on the curb outside the Riverside Family Services building, long after the office had closed. Her shoulders slumped forward like the weight of the world had finally crushed her flat. Her clothes were still damp from the river. Her arms were covered in cuts and bruises. And she was whispering something, the same words over and over, so quietly they almost couldn't hear. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry, Dad. I tried. I'm sorry." The roar of 20 motorcycles approaching should have made her look up, should have made her run. But Nora didn't even flinch. She just kept whispering her apologies to parents who couldn't hear them anymore, to a future that had slipped through her fingers while she'd been too busy saving someone else's child to save herself. Reaper cut his engine and dismounted slowly, deliberately, like he was approaching a wounded animal that might bolt at any sudden movement. The rest of the Hells Angels formed a loose circle around the girl, their presence protective rather than threatening, but Nora still didn't look up. She was lost somewhere inside herself, somewhere dark and hopeless where their motorcycles and their leather and their numbers didn't matter. Reaper crossed the sidewalk and stood in front of her for a long moment, just watching this child who'd given up everything for a stranger. Then he knelt down on the concrete, bringing himself to eye level, and he waited. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, those hollow eyes lifted to meet his. Nora's voice was barely a whisper when she spoke. "I'm nobody. I didn't do anything wrong. Please just let me go." Reaper's chest tightened at the fear in her voice, at the way she was trying to make herself smaller, invisible. "Little sister," he said gently, "we're not here to hurt you. We've been looking for you all day." Nora blinked, confused. "Why? You saved Kieran Cordova. You jumped off a bridge and pulled him out of rapids that would have killed him. You gave him his life back." The confusion in Nora's eyes shifted to something else. Panic. She tried to stand, tried to back away, but her legs were shaking too badly to support her weight. "I'm sorry I ran," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I had to get to my meeting. I had an appointment at 10 o'clock and I was late and I know I messed up. But there was so much blood in the water and he wasn't breathing and I couldn't just leave him there, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Her voice cracked on the last word, and Reaper saw the moment her defenses completely shattered. "I understand if you're angry," Nora continued, tears streaming down her face now. "I understand if you think I should have called someone else. But I know CPR and I know emergency protocols and I was right there and I couldn't let him die. I couldn't." Dash stepped forward then, moving on crutches, his casted leg held awkwardly in front of him. The sight of this massive man struggling to walk seemed to break through Nora's panic. She stared at him, recognition dawning. "You're his father." Dash nodded, his own eyes wet. "And you saved my son's life. The doctors told me that if you hadn't done CPR exactly when you did, Kieran would have suffered brain damage, maybe worse. You gave me my boy back." Nora shook her head violently. "I ruined everything. I missed my adoption meeting. They closed my file. I had one last chance and I destroyed it because I can't stop trying to save people who don't even know I exist." The bitterness in her voice was devastating. Reaper reached out slowly and put his hand on her shoulder. She flinched but didn't pull away. "Kid, you didn't ruin anything. You proved exactly what kind of person you are." Nora looked at him with eyes too old for her face. "I'm the kind of person who sleeps behind dumpsters and steals food and has nowhere to go and nobody who wants her. That's what I am. And now I don't even have a chance at changing that." Dash's voice was rough when he spoke. "What if I told you that you're wrong? What if I told you that my family wants you? That my wife Soledad and I want to foster you, want to start adoption proceedings, want to give you the home you were supposed to get today?" Nora stared at him like he was speaking a foreign language. "Why? You don't even know me." Dash moved closer, balancing on his crutches. "I know you jumped into a river to save my son. I know you sacrificed your only chance at a family so my family could stay whole. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are." Nora's walls crumbled then. All the strength that had kept her alive for 4 years on the streets finally giving way. "But people like me don't get saved," she whispered. "We get pitied and then forgotten. I've been in this system for 4 years and nobody wanted me before. Why would you be different?" Reaper stood and gestured to the 20 men standing in a protective circle around them. "Because you're one of us now. You saved Dash's boy, and that makes you family. The Hell's Angels take care of our own." The floodgates opened. Everything Nora had been holding back for years poured out in a torrent of words and tears. She told them about her father running into that burning building and never coming out, about her mother leaving her at a gas station and driving away without looking back, about the foster home where the older boy came into her room at night and nobody believed her when she reported it, about the second placement where they treated her like a servant, about running away at 11 because the streets felt safer than the system that was supposed to protect her, about teaching herself medicine from library books because helping people made her feel like her father was still alive somehow, about the dream that had kept her going through cold nights and empty days, the dream of becoming a paramedic, of saving lives the way her dad had saved lives, and about this morning, about the choice she'd made when she saw Kieran disappear beneath the water. "I thought if I could just get adopted," Nora said through her tears. "I could go to school. I could make something of myself. I could make my dad proud. But I'm so tired of hoping. I'm so tired of trying and losing." Soledad Cordova stepped forward then, a strong woman with kind eyes and a presence that radiated warmth. She'd been standing quietly behind her husband, listening to every word, and now she knelt in front of Nora and opened her arms. "Mia," she said softly, "I know what it's like to be alone. I grew up in the system too. I know what you've survived, and I know you deserve a family who sees you. We see you, Nora. We want you. Come home." For the first time in 4 years, Nora Castellano let herself be held. She fell into Soledad's arms and sobbed like the child she still was, and the Hell's Angels stood witness, this brotherhood of dangerous men with tears streaming down their weathered faces, because they understood something that the system had forgotten. Family wasn't just blood. Family was who showed up when you were drowning. Family was who dove in without hesitation. and Nora had just found hers. 3 days later, Dash and Soledad Cordova walked into Riverside Family Services with determination written across their faces and emergency foster placement paperwork in their hands. They'd spent 72 hours preparing for this moment, gathering character references, financial documents, proof of stable housing, everything the system could possibly require. Kieran was with them, holding a hand-drawn card he'd made for Nora that said, "Thank you for saving my life," in crayon letters. Ms. Portia Henning reviewed their application with an expression that grew more skeptical with every page she turned. When she finally looked up, her answer was exactly what they'd feared. "I'm sorry, but I can't approve this placement." Dash leaned forward, his voice carefully controlled. "Why not? We meet every requirement. We have a stable home, financial security, clean background checks. My wife is a pediatric nurse with 15 years of experience. What's the problem?" Ms. Henning folded her hands on her desk. "Nora has demonstrated an inability to commit to placement. She's run from 2 previous homes. She's missed 3 adoption appointments. She's classified as high risk. And quite frankly, Mr. Cordova, your association with a motorcycle club raises concerns about whether your home is an appropriate environment for a troubled youth." The discrimination was so blatant that Soledad actually laughed, though there was no humor in the sound. "You're judging my husband because he rides a motorcycle. You're denying a homeless child a family because of leather jackets and bikes?" Ms. Henning's expression didn't change. "The Hells Angels are a known outlaw motorcycle club. Our responsibility is to place children in environments that promote stability and lawful behavior. I have concerns." Dash's hands clenched into fists under the table, but his voice remained steady. "Nora missed today's appointment because she was saving my son's life. She was in a river, performing CPR on a drowning child while you were sitting in this office closing her file. And you want to talk to me about appropriate environments?" The social worker stood, clearly ending the meeting. "I understand your gratitude, Mr. Cordova, but policy is policy. Nora's file has been closed. If you'd like to pursue foster certification and apply for a different child, you're welcome to do so. But Nora Castellano is not available for placement." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Not available for placement, as if Nora was a piece of property rather than a child who'd sacrificed everything to save a stranger. Outside the office, Dash made a phone call that would change everything. Reaper's voice was calm when he answered, but there was steel underneath. "They denied you? They're saying she's too high risk and we're not appropriate because of the club." There was a long pause. Then Reaper spoke 3 words that sent a chill down Dash's spine. "Game on, brother." Within hours, the Hells Angels war room, as they called the back room of their clubhouse, was filled with members from 3 different chapters. They weren't planning violence. They were planning something far more effective. A full-scale assault on the bureaucratic system that had failed Nora Castellano. Willa Finch, the club's lawyer and a former foster kid herself, laid out their strategy. "We hit them from every angle. Legal challenges to the denial, discrimination complaints, media exposure, and we find every skeleton in Riverside Family Services closet because I guarantee you they have them." The Angels mobilized like a military operation. They contacted local news stations with Nora's story. They reached out to the firefighters union, who were outraged to learn that Captain Vincent Castellano's daughter had been living on the streets while the system played games with her life. They gathered testimonials from community members who'd witnessed Nora's character and courage, and they dug into Ms. Henning's case files. What they found made their blood boil. The first foster home Nora had run from, the one where she'd reported abuse, had 3 other complaints from different children, complaints that had been filed and then buried. The second home had a pattern of taking in multiple foster children and using them for unpaid labor while their biological children were exempted. All documented, all ignored. Nora hadn't been running from placement. She'd been running from abuse, and the system had punished her for it. If you believe the system should protect kids, not punish them, comment "no more excuses" right now. Hit subscribe if you can't stand bureaucrats who forget these are real children with real lives. Because the Angels aren't backing down. The story went viral within 48 hours. Local news coverage turned into regional attention, then national. Social media exploded with the hashtag #JusticeForNora. People across the country were outraged by the image of a 14-year-old homeless girl who'd saved a drowning child only to be denied a family because she'd missed the appointment while performing that rescue. The pressure became impossible to ignore. City council members started receiving hundreds of calls. The governor's office got involved, and Riverside Family Services found themselves under investigation for their handling of Nora's case and their pattern of ignoring abuse complaints. Ms. Henning was placed on administrative leave pending review. A new caseworker was assigned to Nora's file, and an emergency family court hearing was scheduled to determine her placement once and for all. The night before the hearing, Nora sat in the temporary youth shelter where she'd been placed, staring at the institutional walls and trying not to hope. She'd learned that hope was dangerous. Hope was the thing that hurt most when it was ripped away. But Soledad visited her that evening, brought her a home-cooked meal, and sat with her while she ate. "Tomorrow changes everything, mija," Soledad said softly. "Tomorrow you come home." Nora wanted to believe her, but she'd been disappointed too many times. What if they say no again? What if the judge thinks I'm too much trouble? Soledad took her hand, and her grip was strong and sure. "Then we appeal, and we keep fighting. Because you're worth fighting for, Nora. You've always been worth it." That night, Nora slept better than she had in weeks, not because she knew everything would be okay, but because for the first time in 4 years, someone was fighting for her, and that made all the difference. The courtroom felt sacred that morning, sunlight streaming through tall windows and falling across wooden benches that had witnessed countless families being made and unmade by the strike of a gavel. Nora sat at the front table beside Willa Finch, wearing clean clothes that Soledad had brought her, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from shaking. Behind her, the gallery was packed. Dash and Soledad sat in the front row, Kieran between them holding that crayon thank you card he refused to leave at home, and filling every other available seat. Lining the walls where standing was permitted were the Hells Angels, 40 men and women in their leather vests, their presence a silent testament that Nora wasn't alone anymore. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Honorable Justice Camilla Thorne, entered the courtroom with an expression that gave nothing away. She reviewed the case file in silence for what felt like an eternity, then looked directly at Nora with eyes that had seen every kind of human story. The hearing began with testimony from the new caseworker assigned to Nora's file, a younger woman named Iris Chen, who'd spent the past week reviewing 4 years of documentation. "What I found disturbed me greatly, Your Honor," she said, her voice steady but angry. "Nora Castellano didn't run from placements because she was troubled. She ran because she was being abused and neglected, and every time she reported it, her complaints were dismissed. The first home had documented incidents of sexual misconduct by an older foster child. Nora reported it. She was labeled a liar and a troublemaker. The second home was using foster children as unpaid domestic labor. Again reported, again ignored. This child has been failed at every level by a system designed to protect her." Iris presented evidence, complaint forms that had been filed and forgotten, follow-up investigations that had never happened, a pattern of systematic negligence that had left vulnerable children in dangerous situations. The judge's expression grew darker with every revelation. Then Willa Finch presented the Cordova family's qualifications. Dash's spotless record, despite his association with a motorcycle club that engaged in charity work and community service. Soledad's 15-year career as a pediatric nurse, with glowing references from supervisors and colleagues. Their stable home, their financial security, their desperate desire to give Nora what she deserved. Character witnesses followed. Mrs. Ramona from the library, crying as she described Nora's years of self-education and determination. The paramedic who'd responded to Kieran's drowning, testifying that Nora's CPR had been performed with professional-level skill. A fire captain who'd served with Vincent Castellano, speaking about the legacy of heroism that Nora carried in her blood. Then the judge did something unexpected. She asked to speak to Nora directly. The courtroom fell silent as Nora stood and approached the bench, her legs shaking so badly she wasn't sure they'd hold her weight. Judge Thorne's voice was gentle when she spoke. "Nora, I've read your file. I've heard the testimony, but I want to hear from you. What do you want?" The question was so simple, and yet Nora had never been asked it before. Not by social workers or foster parents or anyone in the system that had controlled her life for 4 years. She looked at the judge, at this woman who held her future in her hands, and she told the truth. I want to stop being punished for trying to help people. Her voice was quiet but steady. I want to go to school. I want to become a paramedic like my dad. I want a family who sees me, not just another case file. The Cordovas see me, Your Honor. They want me, and I want them. Why isn't that enough? Judge Thorne's eyes were wet when she responded. It is enough, Nora. It's more than enough. She turned to address the entire courtroom, her voice carrying the weight of authority and righteous anger. I've been on this bench for 28 years, and I have never seen a case that so clearly demonstrates the failure of our child welfare system. Nora Castellano is not a troubled youth. She's a hero. She saved a life while the agency tasked with helping her was closing her file for missing an appointment she missed because she was performing that rescue. The irony would be laughable if it wasn't so tragic. Judge Thorne picked up her gavel, and the courtroom held its collective breath. Emergency foster placement is granted to Dashiell and Soledad Cordova, effective immediately. Adoption proceedings will begin within 30 days. Furthermore, I'm ordering a complete audit of Riverside Family Services and their handling of abuse complaints. Ms. Henning's decisions regarding Nora's case, and others like it, will be investigated thoroughly. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that sounded like thunder, like justice, like the end of one life and the beginning of another. The courtroom erupted. The Hell's Angels stood as one, their applause echoing off the walls. Soledad was crying, reaching for Nora with arms that promised safety and love and everything a child should have. Dash was openly weeping, one hand on his wife's shoulder, the other on Kieran's head. And Nora, 14-year-old Nora, who'd survived abandonment and abuse and 4 years on the streets, finally let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved this. If this moment gave you chills, hit that like button. Comment justice served if you're celebrating with Nora. And subscribe because the final chapter of this story will restore your faith in humanity. The ride home was something Nora would remember for the rest of her life. 40 motorcycles forming a convoy through Riverside City, with Nora riding on the back of Soledad's bike, her arms wrapped around this woman who'd chosen to be her mother. People stopped on sidewalks to watch them pass, this impossible parade of leather and chrome and second chances. When they pulled up to the Cordova house, Nora's breath caught in her throat. It was beautiful. Not a mansion, but a real home with a yard and flowers and a porch swing. Dash led her inside, moving carefully on his crutches, and showed her to a bedroom that made her knees buckle. The Hell's Angels had built this, together. Over 3 days of round-the-clock work. The walls were painted a soft blue that reminded her of sky and hope and freedom. Bookshelves lined one entire wall, filled with medical textbooks, anatomy references, emergency medicine guides, everything a future paramedic could possibly need. There was a desk positioned near the window where morning light would pour in, a comfortable bed with clean sheets and pillows that looked like clouds, and on the dresser, in a simple frame, a photograph of Captain Vincent Castellano in his firefighter's uniform, smiling at a camera like he could see the future and was proud of what his daughter would become. Nora walked to the center of the room and turned in a slow circle, trying to take it all in. This was hers, not temporary, not conditional. Hers. I have a room, she whispered, my own room, with books and everything, and it's really mine. Soledad wrapped her arms around Nora from behind, resting her chin on top of the girl's head. You're home, Mija. You're finally home. That night, the Cordova family sat down to dinner together. Nora, Dash, Soledad, and Kieran, who spent the entire meal talking about how his sister, he kept calling her his sister, was the bravest person in the whole world. Nora ate slowly, savoring every bite, not because the food was extraordinary, but because this was what family felt like. This was what belonging tasted like. And for the first time in 4 years, she didn't have to worry about where her next meal would come from, or where she'd sleep that night. When Kieran presented her with his crayon thank you card, Nora cried, not sad tears, happy ones, the kind that came from a heart that was finally learning it was safe to feel again. That night, Nora slept in a real bed for the first time in years. No nightmares, no waking at 4 a.m, ready to run. Just deep, peaceful sleep that came from knowing she was safe, wanted, and home. But the story didn't end there. The viral media campaign that had forced the system to acknowledge Nora's case had exposed something bigger than one girl's struggle. It had revealed systematic failures across the entire child welfare system. Abuse complaints that were filed and ignored. Children punished for protecting themselves. Bureaucrats who cared more about policy than people. The state legislature took notice. Within 6 months, new laws were passed requiring thorough investigations of why foster children run from placements. Protections against retaliation for reporting abuse. Mandatory follow-up on every complaint filed by a child in care. They called it Nora's Law, and it would protect thousands of vulnerable kids for generations to come. The Hells Angels, inspired by Nora's story, established the Castellano Foundation in honor of her father. It provided scholarships for homeless youth pursuing careers in emergency services, firefighting, paramedicine, emergency medical technology, any field where people dedicated their lives to saving others. Nora was the first recipient, with a full scholarship that would carry her through paramedic certification, college, and beyond. But the foundation didn't stop there. 3 other homeless teenagers from Riverside City were identified and placed with carefully vetted angel families within the first year, then 5 more, then 12. The brotherhood that society saw as outlaws became a network of protection for the most vulnerable members of their community. 6 months after the adoption was finalized, Nora stood at her father's memorial outside the fire station, wearing her school uniform and a Hells Angels family support patch that Reaper himself had presented to her. She pressed her fingers against her father's name, engraved in stone, and spoke to him the way she always had. "I did it, Dad. I found a family. I'm going to school. I'm going to become a paramedic, just like you wanted. And just like you taught me, I helped who I could when I could, and it brought me home." A voice behind her made her turn. Reaper stood there with Dash and Soledad, the 3 of them watching her with expressions of pride and love. "Ready to go, little sister?" Reaper asked. "We've got a charity ride today, raising money for foster kids." Nora smiled. This girl who'd learned that family wasn't about blood or biology or the system's approval. Family was about who showed up when you were drowning, who dove in without hesitation, who fought for you even when the world said you weren't worth fighting for. She climbed onto the back of Soledad's motorcycle, wrapped her arms around her mother, and felt the rumble of 40 engines roaring to life around her. The convoy pulled out onto the street, and Nora looked back one last time at her father's memorial. She could almost see him standing there, proud and smiling, the way he'd looked in her favorite photograph. Help who you can, when you can, Nora Bean. That's how we live forever. And as the Hells Angels rode through Riverside City with Nora Castellano Cordova at the center of their protective formation, she understood that her father had been right. Helping people, showing up when it mattered, diving in when everyone else stood frozen, that was how you live forever. Not in stone memorials or official records, but in the lives you touched, the people you saved, the family you built from courage and sacrifice, and the simple, radical act of caring when the world told you not to. Nora's story is real, not the names, but the truth behind it. Thousands of kids are living on the streets right now, alone and invisible, waiting for someone to see them. If you believe they deserve better, share this video. Comment "Every kid deserves a family" if this moved you. Subscribe if you want more stories of people choosing courage over comfort. And remember, help who you can, when you can. You might just save a life, or change one forever. Thank you for watching, and thank you for believing that heroes still exist. Because they do. They're just waiting for us to notice them.